Hello, everybody. My name is Tim Daniel, and welcome to the end of the, I guess, pre-All-Star break episode of Late Night Reds, we're calling this, where we've made it, and I'm actually sad because they're not on TV every night now for 4 nights. It's kind of brutal, right? But I'm very excited to be here, as always, with all of you fantastic people. Joining me this week, my good friend, you can check him out every week on ESPN 1530, Mr. Mo Egger. Mo, what's up, buddy? How are you?
How we doing? What's going on? How's everything? What's new? The Reds are in first place. It's the All-Star break. The first half of the season is over. They can call the rest of the season as far as I'm concerned. Now would be a good time for a lockout.
Yeah, you know, sure. I mean, 94 all over again, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yes, exactly. And they were a game up on August 12th, 1994. And as far as I'm concerned, they're world champions, 1994. So we'll do the same thing this year.
I like it. Should we print the T-shirts?
Let's do it. Print the T-shirts. That's
all right. Perfect. So I definitely would obviously have you on here to, talk about the Reds.
Yeah.
But mostly I was really curious to get your thoughts on this new hip trend on the internet called Threads. I understand you remember?
Yeah. For now, sure. I'm not sure I understand why we're doing this, but yeah, we're on Threads because every time I look at Twitter, I see people tweeting that Twitter's about to die. So just in case that it does, I want to have somewhere else that I can go and promote myself. And so now we're on Threads at Mo Egger. The same, just incessant self-promotion, just on a different social media platform.
Exactly. Yeah. That's what it's all about. It's just excessive self-promotion, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Are you on Threads?
I unfortunately am. Yeah.
Oh,
unfortunately,
boy.
I am.
Oh,
so
man. Wow. It's nice to have you with us on Threads.
Mine was pure FOMO because I don't know any better.
For me, wherever the audience goes, I have to go there. So if they're on Threads, I'm on Threads now. So let's if they bring back MySpace, somewhere out there is my MySpace page from 2003. And if anybody and if anybody can unearth it, the sheer amount of embarrassing content that's out there based on my MySpace page from 2003 would be a gold mine.
Yeah, I was in the 8th grade, so Lord knows what my MySpace page would look like.
I was not in the 8th grade.
Yeah. So actually, shout out good friend Steven Offenbaker stopping by to talk about the legendary sports talk personality Mo Egger. Love to see it.
Huge.
Good friend Steve. So Mo, like we said, we kind of kicked this off. The Cincinnati Reds are in first place in National League Central at the All-Star break.
Yeah.
Let's just think about that sentence here. 91 games into the season. This team last year had this team going into the year, their over-under was 66.5, and they're already 16 wins away from 66, playing through 91 games. They're in first place. I know the Central is what it is. But if someone had told you right before opening day when the Pittsburgh Pirates come to town, the Cincinnati Reds are going to be in first place at the All-Star break, and the St. Louis Cardinals will be 14 games under 500 and more than 10 games out of first, what would you have believed more?
I guess I would have believed the Cardinals would be bad because at some point in our life it was going to happen, right? At some point in our life, the Cardinals were going to be bad. No, I mean, I would have believed neither. Not that I thought the Cardinals were necessarily going to be good, but you would have had a hard time convincing me that the Reds would be in first place and be in first place 9 games over. I know they're setting about an 88 or 89 win pace, so it's not like they're threatening to win 100 games or anything like that. But it's all right. Is the division so bad that they're a game above 500, 2 games above 500, something like that? And somebody has to be in first place. No, I mean they've got a good record. They've got a good team. But relative to where we were a year ago, and I think relative to everybody's, preseason expectations, where this team is, and, they were basically a big hit away from maybe going in 3 up of Milwaukee going into the break. And that would have been awesome. Relative to what I think most of us thought our best case scenarios were for this season, where they are right now it's remarkable. We've seen surprisingly good Reds teams before. The 2010 team was better than anybody ever would have imagined. 1999 sort of came from out of left field. They won 96 games. Maybe even to a degree 1990, although I certainly will counter the assertion that nobody expected them to be very good, because I was around that time, and there was a belief that if everything came together, that team could be okay. They had a bunch of guys who had been a part of second place teams. This is unlike anything I've seen, and the fun part about it to me is it feels like it's the start of something, right?
Yeah.
Maybe they don't win the division. Maybe they don't make the playoffs. I certainly think they have a good chance. But I think regardless of how the next 2.5 months play out, we're going to feel really good about the direction the Cincinnati Reds are going in regardless. And that to me is a lot of fun.
Yeah. I mean, last year you look at we're complaining about, well, how is this team going to somehow win baseball games? And now we're sitting here complaining our biggest issue is why is Kevin Newman batting against right-handed pitching? I mean, I would trade that in 10 times out of 10. You know what I mean? And this year has obviously there's been so many moments, right? And it's just been so much of obviously all these young guys coming up. Matt McClain, who looks like he's been in the big leagues for 7 years. You know what I mean? Ellie De La Cruz, who is, so it was 2 years before I was born when Eric Davis was called up. But from what everyone tells me, this is exactly what it was like when Eric Davis was called up. So I will take their word for it.
Sure.
And Andrew Abbott being tremendous, and Will Benson, who has a terrible start to the year, goes to Louisville, comes back, and all of a sudden is an on-base machine. What has been kind of the thing that's jumped out to you the most on a day-to-day basis watching this club that's been most exciting?
I think it's the way in which they play. There are those of us of a certain age. I love home runs, and certainly this team has hit a bunch. Unfortunately, they didn't hit one today, but they've hit a bunch here over the last 3 weeks. But I think more than anything, they play the brand of baseball that I grew up loving. As a kid in the 80s, and I don't want to date myself, and there's nothing worse than a guy telling you how great things were back in the 80s. I used to love to watch the St. Louis Cardinals play, because I used to think, God, that they're annoying, man. Guy gets on first, he's stealing. They take extra bases. Then they had a team that was built around this big, spacious ballpark they were in. They had AstroTurf, but it felt like if a guy was on first base, but before you blinked, he was going to be on second base. And if there was a hit, he advanced to third, and they forced the defense constantly to make mistakes. Not quite to the same degree, but this team kind of reminds me of at least that brand of baseball where, they might not have a lot of great hitters, although certainly they have a lot of guys who are having really good seasons, but the way in which they play sort of amplifies the overall ability of the offense in the fact that they steal a lot, they take extra bases, they're aggressive on the base paths, and sometimes that's going to cost you, right? I think, I've compared it to watching Steph Curry play. Steph Curry takes some shots that I'm sure Steve Kerr wants to pull out his hair, but you live with it because he's Steph Curry. And with this team, all right, so they might get a guy thrown out at third, or they might get a caught stealing, although they certainly haven't gotten a bunch, or they may make an out at the plate because they're running on contact, but you live with it because it fits. It fits in with the overall offensive philosophy. That to me, more than anything that any individual player has done, and there have been a lot of awesome individual contributions and moments here in the first half. but the way in which they play, the way in which they force the issue with opposing defenses, the way in which they, just they've got to be so annoying. And I think I talked to Sam Lakir about this on my radio show on Friday. The recent home run surge, he said is a byproduct of the fact that pitchers are worrying about a lot of different things when they face the Reds. It's not just the hitter, it's keeping the runner close, it's keeping the guy on first from getting to third. It's understanding that if the ball is put in play, the Reds are going to force the issue. I love that brand of baseball. It's really fun to watch. And for this team, at least so far, it's been effective.
Yeah, it has. And I think like you talk about, there's just so many different contributing factors, like you mentioned. So I was at the game when the 10th in a row, when they beat the Rockies that Tuesday night. Took my wife and daughter for her first game, and just like kind of just watching Ellie that game was my first time seeing him in person. And he has that situation, he gets on second base, and you could tell the reliever's like all distraught and throws into center field. It's just like so fun to see. It kind of made me think, I was talking about this with my buddies today, and you would appreciate this more than just about anyone with your career job, your job for your career. So like 7 years ago in Cincinnati, the city itself, we were through the roof excited that the Reds had Billy Hamilton for speed and the Bengals had John Ross for speed, right? It was like, okay, what else do they bring to the table? And it's like, well, speed. And now on the Red side, you have Ellie De La Cruz, who's like a 17-tool player, and Jamar Chase, who's a top 3 wide receiver, who are very fast dudes that you're excited about their speed, but also bring you way more than that.
Yeah, I mean, with Ellie, it's every conceivable physical gift. It's speed, it's power, the throwing arm. It's, physically at least, it's the total package. But he also looks like he really knows how to play, right? I know he has struggled here and there against lefties, but he really seems like pretty close to a finished product. And, folks bang on the Reds for waiting too long to bring him up. And I think it's fair to wonder, where would this team be if they brought him up maybe 2 weeks prior to when they actually did? At the same time, maybe the time in Louisville helped him polish off those rough edges. And he has gotten here and he fits in. Like he just, and I've said this about Matt McClain as well. They just look like they know how to play.
Yeah.
They look like, with Ellie De La Cruz, it's this incredible physical skill set. And, there have been times this year where, he's taken some third strikes where I'm like, all right, he was maybe a little bit too selective early in the count, but it looks like he has a plan up there at the plate. Like these guys look like they know how to play. Where with Ellie, there's a lot of guys with great physical gifts, but do you know how to adjust to the way the league adjusts to you? And it feels like with Ellie De La Cruz, the answer is yes. And then there's just the jolt of electricity that he gave the team. I was lucky enough to be in the ballpark the night he made his debut, and things in sports rarely live up to the hype, right? That night, Ellie De La Cruz lived up to the hype. The team itself, you got the sense that they were energized by his presence and have been so for the last month. And it's so fun to watch, and it's so fun to think about. With Billy Hamilton, he felt like a gimmick, right?
Yeah.
Not Billy Hamilton's the best defensive center fielder I've ever seen. The Reds have. Now that's saying something because I did watch Eric Davis and I did see Ken Griffey Jr. Billy Hamilton brought some things to the table, but as an offensive player, he felt like a gimmick. Ellie De La Cruz doesn't feel like a gimmick. He feels like a baseball player. And I think that's the difference. Jamar Chase feels like a football player. There's lots of things he can do. Whereas when you talk about somebody having one, sort of clearly defined skill set, but lacking elsewhere, they feel gimmicky. And gimmicks don't last long. Ellie De La Cruz is going to last a long time.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that you talked about quite a bit on your show this year that like I was just like pumping my fist, like agreeing with you, like at my desk at work, was this whole Joey Votto conundrum of like, well, he's going to ruin the vibe, which is the most unbelievably stupid thing I've ever heard in my life.
Where do you know where that comes from?
No, I thought
because I'll hear people, well, the Reds got to make a trade. Well, they don't worry about the guy that they trade for. We're ruining the vibe.
Right.
Nobody worried about Matt McClain ruining the vibe. Like, is Joey known for having like this sourpuss demeanor where he walks in and he's like a black cloud or a wet blanket? Like, where? I've never gotten the explanation where that came from, but you heard it, and I certainly have heard it as well.
Yeah, it's weird to me because, like, I don't know. I have friends who work in other towns who like have guys who are like legends that are nowhere treated the way that the fan bases treats Cincinnati treats Joey Votto, and it's just fascinating to me. And I get a lot of it is like the like if the runner's on second base, and it's like, look, if he's got Derek Dietrich behind him, do you think someone's going to throw him a fastball down the middle of the guy on second base? Like, I'm sorry, the answer's no. But what I was getting to with my question was, obviously he's definitely not ruining the vibes, but we kind of saw this obviously in 21, post All-Star break when he got really hot there and was awesome. 22, obviously he had really good stretches before he got injured. I know the numbers don't look great, but there were stretches there where he played really well.
Yeah.
What we're seeing now, and I know these last 4 or 5 years of Joey Votto have probably been the most fun he's been to watch as far as like a personality.
Yeah.
But just seeing the way that he kind of evolves more and more, like what jumps out to you in that form? As someone who talks about the Reds on a day-to-day basis for your career, what about Joey jumps out to like his evolution now that we're in year 17 with him?
That he really strikes me as someone who is very comfortable with who he is and very comfortable in his own skin and very comfortable kind of letting you know who he is. And also somebody who he just has to fit in now, right? Like so much was asked of him even before the contract, right? I mean, that 2010 team was really good, but Joey had an MVP year. And if he doesn't, I don't know if they win the division.
Yeah.
And so for so many years, Joey had to kind of carry the load, and in many years he carried a heavy load and the team was terrible and through no fault of his. Now it feels like all he has to do is fit in, right? Obviously we would love it if over the last 70 or so games Joey put up ridiculous numbers. That would be awesome. But to me it's just he can just kind of be a cog now, and he really seems happy being that guy. Right? He really seems happy. Just, you know what? I just got to show up and play first base. And there's other guys on this team worth talking to. And there's other guys on this team who are maybe better than me. And that's good. I mean, I wrote a piece 2 years ago that the version of Joey Votto we saw 2 years ago is my favorite ever, because I love these sort of screw it, gripping and ripping and try to hit home runs Joey, who is starting to show more of his personality. He's, the reality with Joey Votto is this: he is one of the best players the Reds have ever produced. He's going to be in the Reds Hall of Fame. I think he's going to be in Cooperstown one day.
Same.
I certainly believe the number 19 should be retired, but unfortunately, he is the best player that they've ever had who's not really connected with winning. All of the other franchise icons, and I'm not even talking about Hall of Famers, but the most popular players, for the most part, in Reds franchise history, they're connected to some level of team success. Barry Larkin was on a World Series team. Eric Davis, the coolest baseball player ever, hit a 2-run homer off Dave Stewart when I was in the 8th grade in the first inning of Game 1 of the 1990 World Series that I'll never forget. All those guys from the 70s, the most revered names you associate with winning. With Joey, you really don't. Now, that's not his fault, but I want this team to have some measure of large-scale success for a lot of reasons. But near the top of the list of reasons is I'd like for Joey to be connected to success, team success, to winning. And this is, there's going to be some conversations about what lies in store for him after 2023, but there's a very good chance this is his last chance. And I think he gets that. I'm not sure he's a guy who's really too concerned about his legacy, but regardless of where he's playing or if he's playing next year, he's kind of running out of chances. And so he strikes me as somebody who's really appreciative of a chance to be on a good team and be on a team that might give him an opportunity to author a big September moment or a big postseason moment and maybe finally be associated with team success like so many of the other greats that from a production standpoint, he fits in with.
Yeah, I agree. And you mentioned earlier Eric Davis being the coolest baseball player of all time. If you talk to Eric Davis now, he's still cool as hell. There's just no way he's never not cool.
About 5 years ago, I'm at the Holy Grail. Maybe it's 7 years ago. I'm at the Holy Grail before a Reds game, and Eric Davis walked in, and no one said a word to him. Now, there's a part of me that goes, you know what? That's Cincinnati for you, man. We just let you kind of do your thing. There's also a part of me that's like, what's wrong with you people? Eric Davis is standing there, and the coolest baseball player of all time is standing not with anybody, and nobody recognizes Eric Davis is here. What are we doing? And so I couldn't help myself and just said, "Hi, Eric." And I mean, he was just awesome. He's the coolest baseball player who ever lived.
Yeah. It's funny because the opposite of that is when my wife and I were leaving for our honeymoon in 2021, we were at CVG and Pete Rose was at the terminal right next to us.
Yeah.
And I said, "Hey, that's Pete Rose." And she's like, "Are you going to say anything to him?" And I said, "No." And she goes, "Why doesn't anyone go talk to him?" I was like, "Because everyone can."
I've had pleasant interactions with Pete Rose, but I understand where you're going. I got you.
Yeah. One more thing I want to talk about before we kind of move on to some other stuff about this team. I really love one of the things that's been really cool about this team, and I know this has kind of been a common conversation through everybody who kind of covers the ball club. It's this whole it's someone different every day thing.
Yeah.
And it's 100% accurate. You know what I mean? Like Will Benson's walk-off against the Dodgers is still my favorite moment of the year. Maybe Ellie stealing home yesterday takes it because you just have never seen that before. That was insane. And John Sadek, who I know we're both really appreciative of, did such a great job on the call of that. Just unbelievable. Like I want that to be my alarm clock in the morning. But you talk about Nick Senzel has three game-winning hits this year. The other day he kind of had his Peter Warrick Kansas City Chiefs moment, right?
Yes,
this is what it kind of would have felt like. I think Nick Senzel, Peter Warrick might be a great Bengals Reds comp. Come to think of it, well, that's a story. That's a show for another day. But Nick Senzel had that moment, and Joey's obviously had his moments, and Ellie's had his moments. Jonathan India, who I know has been up and down, has had these terrific things. It's just kind of and you can tell with these guys, and I know it's so corny to say, but these guys 1000% love being on the same team. These dudes, they when they're hitting, it's just pass the bat on. And I think it's just kind of just been something where, you talked about how Cincinnati kind of is you just do your thing and we're going to support you. But I think that thing that everyone's kind of getting behind the most, and you can correct me if you feel like I'm wrong here, is just that it's everyone just loves the fact that this team loves each other so much.
Yeah, my favorite night of the season was the Ricky Karcher game against Kansas City because they're playing this extra inning game. They're up by a run. The goofy rule means the other team in the bottom half has to start with the tying run on second base. And the Bally Sports cameras show this kind of goofy looking dude with this weird grin on his face, and it's okay, the guy with a 9.28 ERA or whatever was at Louisville, this guy's gonna close it out. Okay. And I mean, it was so amusing in real time. Just he couldn't throw a strike. Meanwhile, the Royals are collecting pitch clock violations, and the manager's coming in. I mean, but they won the game. And so he does this interview with Jim Day, and the most surprising person in America might have been Ricky Karcher, but all of his teammates hung around for it. In this completely organic, and Ricky Karcher has since been DFA'd. I don't know if he'll ever pitch for the Reds. I don't know if he'll ever pitch in the big leagues again. I'm not sure he should. But what was so striking to me was how excited his teammates were for him. And perhaps understanding that this, I mean, he got sent down the next day. This might be it for this kid. This might be the pinnacle for Ricky Karcher. and they all, were they kind of making fun of him? Sure, but that's okay. They were more than anything, I just enjoying him getting a moment.
Yeah.
I've watched sports for a long time, man. You can tell when those things are contrived, and you don't usually see such things. You could tell those guys were really, really excited for him. That's my favorite moment of the season. Ellie doing what he did on Saturday is a very, very close second. But a lot of all year long, people have remarked like, "God, these guys are so much fun. They're so likable." There was no better illustration of why we say such things than that night in Kansas City, because of just how the guys just seemed to enjoy watching one of their teammates, a guy who had been their teammate for just a couple of days and would not be their teammate again in 24 hours, watching him get his moment. Those things, you can, I can at least, I can tell when those things are not
right
real. That night was real, and so far at least reflective of my favorite moment of the season.
I absolutely love when he has this post-game interview. We obviously know the holy shit thing.
Yeah.
And Jim Day just look at the camera just like,
yeah,
was like an all-time moment. Just
cable
so great.
TV, man. The rules are different, right? Yeah, but they're you really, I've watched baseball now for almost 40 years. You can tell when a team has legit chemistry. And by the way, I mean, who knows if it's going to be this way next year? Who knows if it's going to be this way in 2 years? I mean, the fun thing about this team right now is like they're all sort of making the same amount of money. Well, money changes things. So, who knows if it'll be this way in a couple of years, but it's this way now. And it's really fun to watch. You more than any other sport, if you're a slightly more than casual fan, you spend pretty much every day for 6 months with a baseball team, watching them, right? It's not that way in the NFL. It's not that way in college basketball. It's not that way in the NBA. After a while, you can tell, like, all right, are these guys in it for each other? Or are they in it for themselves? Are these guys like, do they really love playing for each other and with each other? Or are they, and with this team, it feels so genuine. And as a fan, it makes the experience of watching them every day so much more fun.
Yeah. One of my favorite conversations I have with you over time. I've been lucky to know you for a while now. One of my favorite
I wouldn't say lucky.
Yeah, well, you could say the same thing about me, So, one of my favorite conversations I have with you, whether it's just on any sport in general, it's just about like what you hear and see in broadcasts of games.
Mm-hmm.
And you and I've talked about Mike Breen before and how we both feel like he's the greatest NBA commentator of all time.
Mm-hmm.
We've talked about different things. And you like I said earlier, I know you and I have both shared admiration for John Sadak in the past and how much we enjoy how good he is at his job.
Mm-hmm.
And Tommy Thrall is incredible on the radio. He's just
fantastic.
So good.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel like the Cowboy has just been like has not had a flaw this year? I feel like every time I listen to Brantley, he is perfect on broadcast. He's always been good. Like, I'm not trying to say this is some new thing, but like this year, listening to him when I'm in the car and he's like got his like couple innings or he's like calling a moment, I feel like he is nailing every moment. Maybe that's just how fun the team is, but he has been so damn good this year.
I feel like I was thinking about this because I listened to most of today's game on the radio, which was Tommy Thrall and Chris Welsh. And I feel like, and I thought to myself, Chris, for my money, Chris Welsh should get the Ford C. Frick Award one day. He's been doing games for 30 years here. The Ford C. Frick Award in Cooperstown criminally overlooks color analysts. Chris Welsh is awesome, and Jeff Brantley is terrific as well. But I kind of said to myself, like, Chris seems reinvigorated, right? And how could you not be, right? Especially if you've, if you called all those games last year, especially if you've been behind the microphone for so many seasons where by this time of year they were just playing out the string. And, now these games themselves matter. Like last year, in July, the games didn't matter. So when the games matter more, the finer points of them matter more. And who better to talk about the finer points of these games than Chris and Jeff and Barry Larkin? And I think those three guys in particular have. I think this team has helped bring out the best in them, because I feel like the quality of the teams themselves have made those three broadcasters, Tommy and John, I think are sort of in a different category, because play-by-play people are they're asked to do different things. But I think with Chris and Jeff and Barry, the finer points that they talk about matter so much more, and they almost seem to understand it. And it feels to me like this team has brought out the best in them. I think Jeff Brantley's terrific. I think Chris Welsh is terrific. Barry Larkin's my all-time favorite player, so I'm never going to say anything bad about him. He feels like he's really, and it's, to be quite honest, I think it's taken a little while. It feels like he's developed a really nice chemistry with John, and I think John has really settled into the role quite nicely in a gig that was not easy to move into, and obviously the same for Tommy Thrall. Tommy at least had the runway of being around while Marty was still here. John was thrust into a pretty tough situation a couple of years ago, replacing Tom, broadcasting games remotely, working with three different partners, and I think he has really settled into the role quite nicely, and he calls the game like a fan. He calls the game. He genuinely sounds like, man, there's no place I'd rather be than at this game. I think we are really, really lucky. I revere Marty Brenneman. I like Tom a lot. Tom's always been good to me. I thought Tom did a nice job calling games, but the folks that are calling games now are doing a really good job. And your point about Jeff Brantley, I've agreed with it. He has been terrific. Chris Welsh and Tommy Thrall today had a conversation about Wade Miley, who obviously pitched very well for the Brewers today against Cincinnati. And Chris was just talking about, like, why Wade works so quickly and what the ancillary benefits to that are. And it was so good. And Tommy threw him the right questions. And John Sadak does that very well as well, where, they were talking about Ben Lively early in the broadcast today. And John asked, Jeff Brantley, a question about, like, all right, when Ben Lively's at his best, what do you see? And the broadcasters Reds have, nobody goes on Twitter to talk about how good announcers are. Broadcasters the Reds have are really damn good.
They're very good. Yeah, absolutely. And everything you said is spot on, man. I think Barry's gotten so good. Like, for those who listen to Xavier basketball, like Byron, Barry's brother, is tremendous.
Awesome.
It's just incredible.
And like top 5 all-time nice.
Yeah.
I think Barry,
dude.
Yeah, I think Barry 2 years ago sounded uncomfortable. If I'm being totally honest, I thought he sounded uncomfortable, and you can get why. He had done games before for ESPN, but not. I know he doesn't do most road games, but not like 10 games in a row with a guy that he had never worked with, and it's tough. I mean, I feel like he sounds so much more comfortable. We also get some unintentionally hilarious moments, like John Sadak trying to explain Perfect Strangers to Chris Welsh on a broadcast the other night, and I kind of enjoyed that. So I think we've been lucky with regard to as an MLB.TV subscriber. Oftentimes what I do is I put on West Coast games while I'm kind of preparing for the show the next day or whatever. I know bad baseball broadcasts. We don't have bad baseball broadcasts here.
No, absolutely not. We're definitely lucky there. Want to get to a couple things here real quick. So want to announce, obviously, for those who keep up with the MLB draft, the Reds did select Wake Forest pitcher Rhett Lauder today with the 7th overall pick, the 2023 draft. I don't have analysis for you folks. I just had to make sure we pointed this out because it was news. But his numbers look amazing. So very, very excited to see what Rhett Lauder can bring to the ball club.
I don't think the Cincinnati Reds have ever had a player named Rhett.
I think, come to think of it, I think you're right.
They could have had dozens of them. I have no idea.
But off the top of our heads,
not a lot of Reds in red uniforms.
Right. But hopefully he's good. I'm sure he will be. Danny
Sure.
Graves said he's the best college pitcher he's seen this year, so that sounds
Awesome.
promising.
If Danny
Yeah.
Graves says it, I'm in 100%.
Yeah, I will take it for sure. Community question this week. I really love getting these answers. I wanted to make sure I talked to about this, and I'm really glad to have you on this week for this. So every week I put a thing out through the Patreon for the Riverfront, which please, so my bosses, the Dotsons, don't get mad at me. If you haven't joined already, please do. We do a thing here where I ask a question every week about my favorite whatever. So this week being the All-Star week, it was favorite Reds All-Star Game memory, and got some really cool answers. Got the obvious ones, like the picture here, Todd Frazier home run derby. That moment is never not going to be cool. It's an all-timer for me. But just kind of some different answers I got from different people talking about it. One of them that really jumped out to me was someone mentioned Griffey being in the 2000 home run derby, coming in second place to Sammy Sosa. That was really cool. I think for me, and you can probably attest to this, I was at the All-Star Game in Cincinnati, and it was a really, really cool, just awesome thing. And I don't know if this necessarily counts as quote unquote Reds, even though watching Chapman just like burn the American League in the eighth inning or whatever it was pretty awesome. But there's that moment at the beginning of the game when they're doing all the ceremonies that comes with that with the festivities, where Willie Mays, Hank Aaron, Sandy Koufax, and Johnny Bench are all walking on the field together.
Yeah.
And there was like, as someone like, like you're like me, who just really loves the history of baseball. Yeah. That was just so awesome to be in a ballpark with those four human beings.
Yeah. And Hank is no longer with us, right?
So, yeah. Shortly after.
That was really cool. The whole, franchise for that whole thing was really well executed by Major League Baseball. That was, it's funny. That All-Star Game was kind of I think a pretty dramatic pivot point, where now the home run derby is kind of the bigger deal, right?
Yeah.
We all remember Todd Frazier that night. We all remember the franchise four. We all remember the four guys you just talked about. Does anybody actually remember the game itself?
I actually do.
I remember Mike Trout was the MVP.
He hit a leadoff homer.
But the game itself, a little bit of an afterthought, right? And that's that's not a criticism. It's just, I think it's reflective of how many cool things happened during those couple of days, but also the fact that the home run derby that night kind of became, and I still think is a bigger deal and frankly a better TV event than the All-Star Game itself.
I agree. Yeah, I definitely agree. I know a lot of people, such as some kind of like basic ones that are definitely really cool. Just talking about, there's always that moment of watching when your favorite team's guys get introduced on the field.
Yes.
I always love that moment. Was it Joey a couple years ago in his last All-Star Game? Finally got his first All-Star Game hit, and it was a home run to tie the game.
Yeah.
That was pretty cool.
My favorite one is the All-Star Game was here in 88. The Reds had, it was neat because I believe Jeff Russell was an All-Star, Cincinnati guy. Kurt Stillwell was an All-Star, had been a Red. And so, like, Larkin's an All-Star, Sabo's an All-Star. Maybe like Danny Jackson was awesome that year. I don't know if he was an All-Star. But anyway, the All-Star Game's in Cincinnati. And Whitey Herzog is the manager of the National League team. And as the game sort of goes into the later innings, watching it on TV, it's like, is Chris Sabo going to get into the game? And ABC broadcast the game. And, Larkin came in the game. Larkin actually struck out in the ninth inning, but Larkin didn't start for the National League because they still had Ozzie Smith, but he played and he got a couple of at-bats. Sabo pinch runs in the seventh inning for Gary Carter and steals a base and didn't end up scoring. The National League lost the game. Terry Steinbach, who didn't belong in the All-Star Game, was the MVP. But I remember the excitement when Sabo entered the game, and then when he stole second, how cool that was. And I don't know why, as an 11-year-old kid, the game in Cincinnati, Spuds gets in and he steals a bag. That's my favorite Reds-related All-Star Game memory. Because it happened in Cincinnati. And like, I remember watching the game with my grandfather, and he's like, Whitey Herzog's an a-hole. He's not going to put him in. And it's like, well, Whitey Herzog does seem like an a-hole, but he's not going to put Sabo in. And he got in as a pinch runner for Gary Carter, and then like never didn't play the field. I think the other all-star catcher was Lance Parrish or somebody like that. I'm pretty sure it was Lance Parrish. But Sabo got in and stole a bag, and in front of the hometown crowd, the place went nuts. And that's my favorite all-star game memory. The Reds-related all-star game memory.
Yeah, I remember being irate in '98 when they didn't even put Brett Boone into the game. Like, I was like 9, but I was like, why the hell? Yeah, I was really mad that one. San Francisco in '06 when Griffey made it back.
Mm-hmm.
He was the year's comeback player of the year. That was incredible. Yep. That's one of my favorites. But yeah, it's been really cool to have a franchise like that. I hope Alexis Diaz has a moment that we never forget on Tuesday.
I hope he gets a chance to pitch. Because
don't say that to Stephen Offenbaker. He is trying to petition to him not to pitch and rest his arm.
Did he pitch today?
No, he did not.
Okay, is he going to pitch tomorrow?
Probably not.
He's going to pitch Wednesday?
Well, no, you're right.
Is he going to pitch Thursday?
Hey, I'm on your side here, man.
We don't want him to get some work?
Yeah.
I mean, couldn't Alexis Diaz use an inning of work? So, there's only one Red who made the All-Star team.
Yeah, that's kind of crazy.
One of the coolest stories of the first half of the season are the Cincinnati Reds. That story has a better chance of being told on the broadcast if Alexis Diaz appears on the game than if he doesn't. So I certainly expect Rob Thompson to be judicious, and he's not going to go out there and leave him out to dry. He's not going to throw 45 pitches. But if Alexis Diaz can get some work and his appearance in the game compels the announcers to spend a few more minutes on the Reds, I'm all for it.
Yeah. I'm with you, man. I just like seeing our guys in the game. Not like our former guys.
Well, you can't. I mean, obviously, every team gets a guy. You can't get mad when you can't talk about how this guy should be an all-star, and then he gets to the all-star game and then hope that he doesn't play.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Alexis Diaz, I'm sure, wants to pitch in the game. So far be it for me or anybody else to root for him to not pitch in the game. And again, like. They're not going to leave him out. He's not going to throw 2 innings. So he's going to get an inning of work, hopefully be effective. And again, his appearance in the game, there's no other Red. His appearance in the game is more likely to compel Joe Davis and John Smoltz to talk about the Reds than if he doesn't appear in the game. And I think this team deserves to be talked about, and maybe they still will be, but they have a better chance of being talked about if Alexis enters the game.
Steven did confirm, since he was managed this week, he is okay with him pitching now. So,
good. See, common sense ultimately always prevails.
Yeah. He also said he met Joe Morgan at the 25 game, and I'm jealous of that because obviously, as someone who was way too young for the machine, when I go back and watch those games, Joe Morgan is the guy that I'm always like enamored by. Like, I know Bench and Rose were there, but Joe Morgan is like my favorite historic player. He's my Kareem Abdul-Jabbar for baseball, where it's like, I didn't see this guy play in person, but I watch old stuff. Like, he's my favorite person to watch.
Okay. I buy that. I could totally buy that.
Yeah. Huge Kareem fan.
Sure. But the MVP in back-to-back years when the Reds won the World Series, think about that. He was the National League MVP playing for 2 teams that are regarded as maybe the greatest of all time. Nothing else needs to be said.
Yeah, one of my all-time favorites. So last segment I want to do before we get out of here, and this is obviously when the game does pick back up on Friday, we have Reds Hall of Fame induction weekend, and two of my all-time favorites are getting inducted to the Reds Hall this weekend. That's Bronson Arroyo, or as the late great Doc Rogers used to call him, Bronx on Arroyo, because he was always on fire. And Danny Graves are being inducted this week. And kind of real quick, I just want to get your thoughts on that. Obviously, we knew Bronson was deserving, had an unbelievable career here. Danny Graves had some controversy too, not off the field, but like being in the Reds Hall of Fame that a lot of people were kind of questioning. But I loved Danny Graves, and I thought he was a huge part of that 99 team's bullpen. It was weird when he was starting in like 2002. I didn't love that necessarily.
Yeah.
But two guys who I think have great Reds legacies. I'm stoked that they're getting honored this weekend.
Yeah, it's interesting. Somebody on a radio interview said to me, Danny Graves, Reds Hall of Famer, and I go, well, do you believe that a franchise's leader in a significant category should be in their Hall of Fame? And he goes, yeah. I go, well, he has the most saves of anybody in the history of the franchise.
Yeah.
So why would he not be in the Hall of Fame? And I tend to think the save statistic is sort of stupid, but whatever. They still keep it, and he still had a bunch. And look, unfortunately, he pitched for a bunch of bad teams. I remember the 03 season when he kind of flamed out and he threw the bird up, but he was a two-time All-Star. He was a big part of that 99 team, which was really, really good. That 2000 team, which was okay. Danny Graves had an excellent season for that team. And for a franchise that has had no shortage of really good closers, I would stop short of saying Danny was the best, but he's got the most saves. So yes, he should be in the team's Hall of Fame. And Bronson Arroyo, I think that the moment he retired, we all sort of said, okay, right around now is when he is going to get his chance. Durability, reliability, a guy who was on the starting staff of 3 playoff teams. He had the performance against the Giants in Game 2 in 2012, which I'll never forget. And, with the exception of, there were always 2 times a year where Bronson would get his head kicked in and pitch 2 innings and it'd be awful. But for the most part, 31 to 32 times a year, you felt like we got a good chance of winning the game tonight because Bronson Arroyo was going to pitch. He never missed a start. And if they could strike from everybody's memory the hat they sold with the Bronson Arroyo wig, that would be kind of cool. But I mean, if you go over the last 30 years, how many starting pitchers have been better than Bronson Arroyo? Really, frankly, not that many. He pitched here for a really long time. He was a big part of some good teams. His Hall of Fame induction is well earned, and I'm happy for him. And one of my favorite all-time interviews as well. Just somebody who's forthright and honest and reflective and just struck me as a really good teammate. I'm a big Bronson Arroyo guy, so I'm thrilled that he goes in this weekend.
Also, low-key underrated power hitter. We all remember.
Yes.
Yeah.
What his first 2 starts, he had home runs, right?
Yeah.
One was in Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm not mistaken. And really one of the best trades in recent Reds history,
right?
My God,
yeah.
Willie Mo Pena for Bronson Arroyo. I mean, Bronson had some really, really, when he was the staff ace, the team was bad because you don't want Bronson to be your staff ace. But by the time the Reds got good, when you're like, hell, Bronson's our 3 or our 4, that's pretty damn good. And he filled that role really, really well.
Yeah, I know. We had Drew Stubbs on here a couple weeks ago, and he actually talked about a bunch of the guys from that team are going to be in town this weekend for Bronson stuff. So that's going to be pretty cool.
That's pretty neat.
So hopefully you guys get to see them walking around the stadium this weekend. But Mo, man, it's always so fun to have you on a show and get to talk and just chop up with you. I really appreciate you taking time with me on a Sunday night. As a new dad, I understand how 9 p.m. works. So I'm definitely appreciative of it. But man, thank you so much. And, as always, if you have anything you want to plug, when people can check your show out, any socials, threads.
Yeah. But please, sweet Jesus, follow me on Threads at Mo Egger. I need a lot of Threads followers. I'll do thread. I'm not doing TikTok. So if doing Threads means I don't have to do TikTok, sign me up for it.
Absolutely. And also, if we're out here, good friend Pat made sure we had to mention Bronson's JTM commercials. You're 1,000,000% right, my friend.
Beef hoagie.
The best. Yeah. Mo, always appreciative, my friend.
All right, man. Thanks.
We're gonna get out. Everyone have a good night. We'll see you next week.